There are tens of thousands of Melee players. Thousands have entered majors, maybe hundreds have made it all the way to a top 8 on Championship Sunday. But in nearly 25 years of Melee history, only 22 people have ever actually won. So, how hard is it to win a Melee tournament? If you played Melee at all competitively, whether it was for thousands of dollars or just simply bragging rights, I'm sure you've probably heard something like this before. Well, my friend Hugh Jazz is the best in his college dorm. He could wipe the floor with you. The unfortunate reality about this is that Hugh is actually, truly, a very small fish in a very, very big pond. So now you're probably wondering, what even is a major tournament anyway? And why have only 22 people ever won them? Hugh here won his local college tournament. Does that count? Well, maybe. The thing is, how Melee defines a major is kind of nebulous. As defined by Liquipedia, major tournaments feature a large prize pool and a good number of top-tier players. On the Smash Wiki page, a major or national tournament is defined as a larger tournament that draws an extraordinary amount of attendance from the broader region as a whole. In North America, these tournaments attract players from across the United States and Canada, while European majors feature smashers from across the continent. A super major, which would be one level above major, are defined as the most prestigious tournaments in the Smash scene, and of course are included in our list of major tournament winners. If I'm being honest, the true definition for how we label an event's scale is a bit vague and honestly entirely subjective. Sometimes events will become promoted to majors or demoted to something less prestigious based on top-level attendance. Even this year, Full Bloom had one of the highest number of attendees, but was not considered a major. And by the way, all this technical jargon is for open bracket events. Invitationals are almost always defaulted to majors since they already have most, if not all, of the best competitors for their given time period. Also, all of these sites and their definitions include tournaments that occurred during the pandemic, where we, of course, were unable to compete in an in-person setting. And while there is an argument to consider or not consider these major level, for the sake of simplicity, and so this video doesn't go even longer than it already is, we're not going to include these in our rundown of tournament winners. And for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to throw the people who won online majors on the screen now. So, with that out of the way, let's meet the 22 players, the only players, who were able to pull it off. But I don't think any of these 22 players can handle the in-depth strategy and fantastical features you'll find in today's sponsor, Silver and Blood Requiem. Board-style tactical RPGs are actually some of my favorite games, and this even has a bit of an auto-battler element to it that I really enjoy. The gothic themes and high-quality anime-style cutscenes are really cool and blend into the gameplay well without being too intrusive, and overall it's just been a fun time. It also has an engaging narrative and pretty deep lore. For fans of medieval alchemy, vampires, and dark tales, this story in Menexus holds more than a few unexpected twists. With over 50 vassals across 4 factions, test yourself in the Blood Arena or follow the threads of fate to unravel the mystery behind Silver and Blood. You can strengthen your blood power through equipment, skills, and the Spirit Siphon to create a custom lineup, and if you play gacha games, you'll also notice how high the drop rate is. Every 20 to 30 pulls you can get a great one. Check out the vassals I got from just my first day of playing. Plus, there's famous Japanese voice actors, and the music by renowned composer Yasunori Nishiki is kinda bumpin'. And yeah, it's been playing in the background this whole time. I think you're really gonna enjoy the strategic gameplay this game has to offer, and if you're interested in stepping into the world of Silver and Blood Requiem, you can find a link to download it in the description, or use that QR code you see in the corner of your screen. By the way, there's also a webpage event called What Hue Does Your Blood Hold, where you can take a test and win in-game rewards. Those are also linked here as well. Thank you again to Silver and Blood Requiem for supporting me and the channel, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Our story begins, well, at the beginning. Somebody had to win the first major, and who other than this guy? That's right, a Survivor contestant won the very first major Smash Bros tournament, and it turns out he was pretty good at Smash too. Sephiroth Ken, who would eventually shorten his tag to just Ken, would soon become known as the King of Smash. He was easily the best player in the world in the early days of competitive Melee, and he won the very first tournament considered a major. On January 19th, 2003, Tournament Go 4, hosted by the legendary Matt Deasy, a person considered the founder of competitive Smash, went down at Matt's house with over 90 entrants. All stages were legal except Temple and Yoshi's Island 64 based, and all items were on except healing based, so Melee was a little bit different back then. Unfortunately, as may be a consistent theme with tournaments of this era, some of the coverage was lost to time, so we only have Game 4 of this Grand Finals. But either way, with wins over old school West Coasters of the era like Reciferous and Sultan of Samitude, Ken went down as Melee's first major winner, and he stayed Melee's only gold medal recipient for over a year. Fast forward to August of 2004, and Tournament Go 6, still hosted by Matt Daisy, had undergone a lot of growth. Growth from a single-day event to a two-day event, growth from 90-ish entrants to over 100 entrants, and growth from across the globe as one of the first international tournaments in Melee history. Its 112 total entrants made TG6 the largest Melee tournament of its time, and Ken, who had won literally everything up until this point, was out at 9th. Which, by the way, the stat line of this is the first time Ken didn't win a tournament is crazy, but anyway. With Ken out at his worst placement since he started playing the game, an opportunity arose for a new competitor to claim the throne, and Azen, Ken's rival from the East Coast, rose to the occasion. In his run, Azen defeated international challenger Captain Jack and the best Ice Climbers player in the world, ChuDat, to become the second person to win a major tournament. TG6 was the last event in the series, and although cool we got a non-Ken winner, Azen wouldn't hold on to that spotlight for long. Not even a month would pass before our next major winner, during a time period we like to call the MLG era. Captain Jack, the international challenger Azen had defeated at TG6, was still in the States and he wanted a win. He'd get one at MLG San Francisco 2004, and although the full results of this event are unfortunately lost to time, we know Captain Jack won the tournament from the losers bracket. Ken, now for the second time in his career, did not win the tournament, losing out to Isaiah for third, and Isaiah would get absolutely smashed in grands, a 6-0 stomping by Captain Jack, which would mark Japan's first major victory alongside our third major tournament winner. MLG San Francisco also went down as the first solo Sheik win ever, a record that would not be touched for 20 years, but we'll get back to that one later. Right at the top of 2005, we got Most 3, which was one of the most popular tournaments of that era because our fourth major tournament winner, Isaiah, tried. Its 128 entrants already usurped the title of the largest Melee tournament ever from TG6. The grand final set between Isaiah and Ken was featured in an episode of Samox's famous The Smash Brothers documentary, and I also have it as an entry in my Melee's Greatest Hits series because it was just that good. Which, hey, by the way, you should watch both of those because they're sick, but also do me a favor and make sure you're subscribed to the channel. If you're new here from all the shorts, first off, welcome, but I actually prefer doing longer videos like these, but they take a while to produce, sometimes hundreds of hours across me and my team. Subscribing is a good and free way to support the channel, and you can always take it back if you feel like I didn't earn your subscription. Anyway, not to fully rehash mine or Samox's pieces, Isaiah was often viewed as a sidekick to Ken, who, as we already mentioned, had been winning practically everything. Isaiah turned it around in an epic fashion at most though, a crazy reverse 3-0 that, at the time, made people doubt if Ken really was the best. It would take over a year for another major tournament winner to appear, and in April of 2006, PC Chris would kickflip his way into a victory at MLG New York. PC shocked the Melee world by defeating Ken not once, but twice at this event, making him the first Falco player in the game's history to beat Ken in bracket. While Ken was still winning practically everything else under the sun during this time period, what MLG New York did was set the stage for a number of new and budding rivalries. It firmly established PC Chris as one of the best players in the world at that time, someone who could stand up to Ken, and it signaled the start of a change. For the first time since, well, forever, Ken wasn't just able to go to any tournament and be guaranteed a top placement. PC Chris would go on to win a few more majors in that same year, and he even got this big check. Nice. So at this point, we've had 5 major winners over the first 3 years of the game's history. Of those winners, Ken, Azen, Captain Jack, Isaiah, and PC Chris, it was pretty much all Ken. But like I just mentioned, Ken would start to be challenged, and a passing of the torch was soon to come. The first major of 2007, Cataclysm 3, was a significant moment in Melee's competitive history. Namely, for whatever reason, whether it was its location in Spencer, Massachusetts, or otherwise, meant Ken was absent, which created a massive opportunity. Actually, 3 out of the top 4 placers here had not won before. It was PC Chris who won the last major tournament of 2006 up against ChuDat, KoreanDJ, and Mewtwo King. PC finished in 4th, paving the way for a guaranteed new major winner, and it would be Mewtwo King versus KoreanDJ to decide it. It was an intense 5-game set, but Mewtwo King, winning on his trusty Final Destination pick twice, which is kind of against the rules now by the way, but you can gentleman on, so whatever, was able to clutch it out on the very last stock of the very last game. After this, 2007 Mewtwo King would become become something of a legend. These years cemented him as easily the best player in the world, even better than Ken, who had dominated everything up until that point, and that was reflected in the SSBM Retro rank, where M2K topped the charts in 2007 and 2008. M2K's title as the 6th person to win a major was rather short-lived though, and in fact, the two others who challenged him for first, KoreanDJ and ChuDat, were about to get their moment. If you went ahead and watched the Smash Brothers documentary like I asked you to earlier, you'll notice KoreanDJ as the first character introduced in this story. KDJ became well known in this 2006-2007 era with his chic, consistently placing in top 8s and being notorious for money matching any top player he could as a way to fast track his improvement. That improvement showed in spades when he first beat Ken at MLG Orlando 2006, and then twice more at the 2006 MLG National Championships, which leaves KoreanDJ as one of the only players in the game's history to ever hold a positive record over the King of Smash. As for KDJ's major win, that went down in my very own hometown of Long Island, when I was just a small lad about to attend high school. At MLG Long Island 2007, only a couple months after his brush with first place at Cataclysm, KoreanDJ went on a rampage, taking out Mewtwo King in a winners finals set 3-0 and a grand finals set 3-2 to win his first major. MLG Long Island would also have a lot of history for low tiers, with Warrior Knight's Bowser getting 9th, the highest placement for that character like ever, and Bum getting 4th with DK, another record that would be held for nearly 20 years, but I have like a billion videos about DK on the channel already, so you can just go watch one of those if you want to learn more. The very next event in the MLG Smash Series circuit was Pound 2, happening on June 16th to 17th. The doubles bracket received a bit of criticism because some teams were forced to play 1 versus 2 matches in the first round of winners due to late attendance, which resulted in a lot of the top level teams of the time being immediately sent to the losers bracket. And although ChuDat had exited the doubles bracket with one of his worst doubles placements ever, he actually became our 8th tournament winner here in the singles bracket, as well as the first and only Ice Climbers main in Melee history to ever win a major. And you know, for a set that went down 17 years ago, it was honestly pretty advanced. Ice Climbers weren't exactly a popular character in competitive Melee at that time, having the secondary and oftentimes stupid Nana to have to manage. And what makes this set even more impressive with the hindsight of history is that Chu didn't wobble in it. Wobbling was an infamous and now banned technique, which was essentially an infinite combo that Ice Climbers could get by simply getting a grab with Popo, the main climber. If performed correctly, the opponent can't break out of the infinite. There is no interaction aside from not getting grabbed in the first place, which was why events had gone back and forth on its legitimacy for years, eventually deciding to adopt a widespread ban on it around 2018 to 2019. The origin of the technique is roughly that Kish Prime and Kish Squared, two prominent tournament organizers of the era, discovered the technique sometime in 2005, but no one really paid attention to them. Wobbling didn't really get popular until Wobbles, the player by whom the technique is named after, and another Ices player who almost won a major, used it at a 2006 tournament called NCT2, which is the oldest known footage of wobbling being used in tournament. Anyway, there's one of your quick Melee history lessons. But ChuDat entered Pound 2 Grands from winners after a close Game 5 set with Captain Falcon main Giano, meaning he only needed to win a single set against Mewtwo King to win the tournament. And after one more Game 5 against the former god of the game, ChuDat became the 8th person to win a major, as well as the last new person to win a major in 2007. As far as majors go in terms of Liquipedia's definition, 2008 was honestly barren. It was the beginning of what Melee fans called the Dark Ages. Brawl had been released, and with players migrating over to the new title, Melee felt more or less dead in the water. As a result, from 2008 until the end of 2011, there would only be like a handful of major events per year. 2008 had a mere 2 tournaments listed as majors on Liquipedia, both happening in February of that year, and in both, we'd get 2 new major winners. The first was at Pound 3, the sequel event to ChuDat's first major victory, and its winner perhaps ushered in a new era of the game, while also going on what is still considered one of the greatest losers bracket runs in Melee history. Mango, who had begun making waves in the scene in 2007 with bronze medals at EVO World 2007 and Super Champ Combo, proved that he was here to stay. He lost to Silent Wolf in the very first round of Pound 3, then proceeded to beat Cactuar, Forward, Azen, ChuDat, Court, PC Chris, and Mewtwo King in 2 sets to claim his first major. This also completely completes the longest possible losers bracket run a player can go on, just period. And Pound 3 still holds up as one of the greatest losers runs of all time too, as the players Mango beat on that run were of extremely high quality. Mewtwo King, easily the best player in the world in that year and the year prior, PC Chris, ChuDat, and Azen, all major winners we just went over, and Kart, a player who was top 4 in the world who is barely known in modern Melee, but we'll save that story for another day. This win almost instantly solidified Mango's place as the second best player in the world in 2008, and little did we know, following the declining activity of Melee's original top brass like Ken, KDJ, Azen, and PC Chris, it would introduce the beginning of the era of the 5 gods, the rest of whom we'll meet shortly. If you've been paying attention, you may have noticed that every single major I've mentioned in this video has taken place in the United States. Up until this point, only one international tournament was considered a major, Jack Garden Tournament in Japan, but everything else, including every major which introduced a new winner, happened in the good old USA. This was just a characteristic of competitive Melee throughout the years though, as the largest volume of events with the largest numbers of competitors were happening in the United States. But there are two moments in Melee's history where a new major winner was crowned on international soil. The first one happened at the only other major of 2008, just a few weeks after Pound 3, at a tournament called Epida Smash Arena 2 in France. This tournament held the record as the largest European Melee tournament for almost 7 years, and it marked an interesting counter to the era of the 5 gods that I mentioned earlier. Its winner, AmSa, with an H, yes, there was a different AmSa than the Yoshi AmSa that doesn't have an H, it's just AmSa, yeah, you get it. He went down as the second ever solo Sheik player to ever win a major. See, I told you that'd be important. But we're actually not done there, since AmSa and Captain Jack would hold on to this bit of stats for almost 15 years. This event was one of the rare times in Melee where Grand Finals was played out as a best of 7 instead of a best of 5, and the finalists, perhaps fittingly, AmSa and Captain Jack, took that match as far as it would go. AmSa's win at Epida Smash Arena 2 would mark the last major tournament until 2015 where one of the 5 gods would not win. In other words, once we meet the next 3 gods after Mewtwo King and Mango, no other player would win a tournament for nearly a decade. 2009 would come around and Mango seemed to firmly cement himself as the best player in the world for that year, winning 2 out of the meager 3 majors that were still happening through Melee's dark ages. However, in November, there was a new Jigglypuff in town, and he was Mango's diametric opposite. HungryBox had broken out in 2009 with a Jigglypuff that, to some, was completely different from the aggressive and crazy style Mango had brought to the character. HBox was patient and willing to play the long game, and that resulted in podiums at the very first Genesis, as well as a tournament win over Mewtwo King at Tipped Off 5. HBox's first major win, though, happened at Revival of Melee 2, a New York event that was perhaps even more famous for Mango losing. You see, this player Kage, known at the time as the best Ganondorf player in the world, had double eliminated Mango, something that seemed completely inconceivable. But with the only major tournament winner of 2009 out at 4th, and with Kage, HungryBox, and a player named Dr. PP still in bracket, another new major winner was guaranteed. HBox defeated Dr. PP in a winners finals and grand set with a pair of 3-1s to win ROM 2, marking his first ever major win for a player who has still undeniably the largest trophy case in Melee history. And it's not like there weren't signs of the other gods at all yet. In fact, that same Dr. PP, the player who got second, that was his breakout tournament, and he would actually become our next major winner just a year later. Dr. PP, which is a name I don't think I can continue saying out loud without maybe getting this video demonetized, would eventually change his tag to PPMD, much better. But his major victory at the following Revival of Melee was hardly unexpected. After all, he did just get second at the previous one and placed higher than Mango, which had people considering him to be the best Falco player in the world. That performance would help him sneak in at the number 10 spot on the 2009 retro ranking. PP's 2010 was solid, having another brush with second place against HungryBox at Tipped Off 6, but Revival of Melee 3 truly cemented PPMD into godhood. He'd win 2 sets over Mewtwo King to claim his first title, actually being sent into the losers bracket by Kirby Kaze, one of the greatest Canadian players of all time, but otherwise this bracket was fairly run-of-the-mill. PPMD would win a number of other tournaments in his rather short tenure with the game, culminating in his swan song Apex 2015, the best win of his career at one of the craziest tournaments just ever. I have a feature-length documentary about that tournament if you want to learn more. In 2009, the inaugural Genesis Grand Finals featured Mango and a mysterious Peach player from Sweden. Genesis is still, to this day, one of, if not the biggest event series in Melee, and to have a foreign challenger at its very first entry made for an insanely compelling storyline. That player who ended up taking a second place was named Armada, the last of the 5 gods, and he and Mango would carry on the legendary storyline of Genesis by essentially claiming the tournament as their own. For the next 4 entries, every Grand Finals was between these two players. Armada's introduction into the pantheon of major winners happened at the second Genesis, and despite a long gap between Genesis 2 and 3, he would win the next couple after that as well. As for this tournament though, Armada would win G2 by defeating Taj, then known as the best Mewtwo main in the world, who had surprisingly upset Mango with his Marth. Then Armada beat Mango in a Game 5 Grands, marking the second international competitor to win a major after AmSa with an H, and the beginning of several interesting developments in Melee. The last of the 5 gods had just won their first major, and for the next 4 years, no one new would join them. The era of the 5 gods was one of the most well-defined segments of dominance Melee had ever seen. From 2008 until the end of 2014, if at least 2 of these otherworldly players were at a tournament, one of them would win, guaranteed. They also rarely, if ever, lost sets to players outside of their own ranks. The exception to the rule and our 14th major winner would appear at the beginning of 2015 in Gothenburg, Sweden, where Leffen, who just a month later would be dubbed the Godslayer for being the first player to defeat each of the 5 gods, would win his first major. Beast 5, the European qualifier for Apex 2015, where Leffen would earn that Godslayer title, was the largest European Melee tournament ever, even to this day, easily qualifying it into major tournament status. AmSa Sheik got 4-stocked for the literal first time ever against Armada, and with wins over Mango and Armada, Leffen would make his mark. This was the first time since AmSa with an H's win at Epita Smash 2 in 2008, where a major was won by someone other than one of the 5 gods. And that was kind of a breath of fresh air. For the first time in a while, it felt like a changing of the guard was coming for competitive Melee. That feeling of a new wave of competitors swooping in to stop the dominance of the 5 gods was rather short-lived. Leffen's summer was red hot, even making it to number 2 in the world on the summer 2015 ranking, but at that time, he was the only one who could really hang with the 5 gods. While yes, Leffen did win a majority of the tournaments listed as majors in 2015, the 5 gods were still the 5 gods. 2016 and the first half of 2017 were essentially ran by Armada and HungryBox, with the occasional smattering of Mango, Mewtwo King, or Leffen, but overall, it felt like we were back to the same era of dominance that defined the early 2010s. It wasn't until July 23rd at DreamHack Atlanta 2017 where someone new would find themselves in the spotlight, and his name was Plup. That same summer where Leffen was ranked 2nd in the world, Plup had made his first appearance within the top 10, and up until this tournament, he was more or less considered next up in terms of people who could reasonably beat all 5 gods. He was easily considered the next best player behind Leffen, who wasn't a part of that elite group, and he'd already won at least one set against every god except Armada leading up to this tournament. And although his first major win wouldn't give him the Cinderella story victory over Armada, Hbox was probably his worst matchup of the gods, with Plup only taking a singular set out of 15 from 2013 to 2016. Plup did manage to win a set at CEO 2017 over HungryBox just a month prior to DreamHack, despite losing the tournament to Hbox, and he was narrowly able to win a 3-2 set in winners finals here to make it into Grands. Although Hbox reset the bracket with a 3-0, Plup answered right back with a 3-0 of his own to win what is considered his first major. And in case for whatever reason you may think that doesn't count, Plup did get to get a win over Armada just a couple months after DreamHack at the Big House 7, which marked him as the second player to ever win against all 5 gods, and he took an even bigger tournament with wins over Mango, Hbox, and Armada again at Genesis 5. Plup yum yum. While the era of the 5 gods raged on, waiting in the wings was a Marth player who would eventually take on the mantle that Ken and Mewtwo King once carried. Little did we know at the time that Zain would become one of the greatest players the world would ever see, but in his early years he had a massive problem. Well, I should say everyone had a massive problem, and that was HungryBox. Zain Nagme was already walking into a difficult challenge in that he was a solo Marth main, a character HungryBox was more than comfortable fighting. In fact, the last time Hbox had lost to a Marth player in a best of 5 set was over 3 years before before Zain's first tournament win at Apex 2015, where HungryBox would be defeated by PPMD. Shine 2018 was a totally different story though. Zain had beaten HungryBox for the first time and Mango for the third to make it into Grands, then proved his first win against HBox wasn't a fluke with another victory to secure the tournament. I have a lot of admiration for this major in particular because the storyline of exactly how Zain would overcome such a problematic matchup in HungryBox is just really rad to me. If you look at his match history, you can literally see Zain getting closer and closer with each passing set, going from 0-3s to 1-3s to 2-3s until finally winning. That type of work ethic is what makes Zain the current best player in the world, and I don't think that would have happened had he not started his major winning journey here. Zain's first major win at Shine would mark him as one of a very select few players in Melee to take a major tournament over any attending Five Gods, a product of the time period we were in, sure, but perhaps another signal of a changing of the guard. At the time, Zain was ranked 22nd in the world, which also marked him as one of the lowest ranked players to win a major. Obviously, he wouldn't stay at that rank for long, quickly jumping to top 10 status that same summer. I made a documentary for the Golden Guardians about Zain's historic win over on GG Melee if you want to check that out. It was a really fun piece and one of the last things I got to do for GG before they unfortunately shut down. Just under a year later, the Smash and Splash Tournament Series would have its 5th installment, and with our 17th major winner, a near 15-year-long curse was broken. Justin Wizzrobe Hallett was already a fairly well-established name in the Melee scene. He debuted on 2014's SSBM rank as a top 30 player, and quickly became the best Captain Falcon main in the world, becoming a top 10 player by 2017. But there was a problem. Captain Falcon, supposedly, could never win a major. Isaiah, the 4th person and only Captain Falcon to do it until that point, won most in 2005, and since then there's been this prophecy or curse, however you may look at it, that a Captain Falcon would never be able to do it again. You can probably see where I'm going with this, but Wizzrobe was able to prove the doubters wrong on June 2nd, 2019 at Smash and Splash 5. His run in the Melee singles bracket included wins over top tier players like Spark, Nun, Leffen, AmSa, and 2 consecutive victories against HungryBox in winners and grands. In addition to Wizzy breaking the curse that had been laid upon competitive Melee in 2005, it was also like literally the coldest pop-off of all time. I mean, come on, HBox could never. In case you wanted non-stop action, for the first time since 2008, back-to-back majors would produce back-to-back new winners. The very next week after Wizzy's win at Smash and Splash would be Smash Summit 8, an invitational-styled event inspired by Take TV's Home Story Cup for StarCraft 2. And Axe, a Pikachu player who had been at or near the very top of competitive Melee for a decade at this point, had nearly touched the ceiling 2 different times, mere weeks to months earlier, at Genesis 6 and GOML 2019. Now, Axe had been a champion of this character practically forever, but in the early days of Melee, people called Pikachu a budget fox, since on a more technical side, they had the same jump squat, which made switching between them feel a bit more natural, and on a more general side, they could be played in very similar rushdown heavy styles. This had worked out for Axe for years, but never enough to net him that elusive major win, until June 13th, 2019, which, by the way, I get that given the nature of the pandemic, 2019 may not seem like a long time ago, but that was 6 years ago, and that is a long time. Anyway, Axe ended up getting invited to Smash Summit 8 due to his high overall ranking. And after wins on Zain, Mango, Wizzrobe, and Leffen, he would make it into grand finals on the winner's side to face off against Wizzrobe again, seeking his second major win in the back-to-back. This was already super cool, but for the literal first time ever in major tournament history, it wouldn't be a Fox or a Marth or a Sheik in grand finals, it would be a Pikachu up against a Captain Falcon. While Wizzrobe was able to win the first set to reset the bracket, Axe was able to close out a 3-1 win in his second set of Buffer to become the 18th player and the very first Pikachu player to win a major tournament. Even after winning Summit 8, there haven't really been any other Pikachu players who have seen the same level of success as Axe, and no one has gotten this close with the electric mouse since. And just as a heads up, this was around the time where my channel really started to take off, so if you're new here, I've probably already made a video about almost all of these moments from this point forward. I'll leave all the links in the description if you're interested, or in the cards up here, but yes, I made a documentary about Axe's journey as a competitor, which culminated in this win. A rather long gap in offline events due to a global pandemic meant there was a lot of time for players to get good. And after the cinema that was Smash Summit 11, producing quite possibly the greatest Melee set in the game's history, fans were itching for more action. They wouldn't have to wait long though, as on September 10th through 12th, 2021, Riptide, the spiritual successor to the Smash and Splash series, made an epic return as the very first offline open bracket major for Melee since the pandemic. Attendance at the very top level was somewhat scattered, and it's possible players didn't really know what to expect going into their first open bracket in a year and a half, but it was still a spectacle. I was working as media for events at the time, so I caught Cake Assault, the best Rivals of Aether player in the world, pop off so hard he dislocated his shoulder, which ended up going viral. MKLeo went all Byleth in top 8 to win the ultimate bracket, and another new major winner was crowned for Melee. For our 19th tournament winner, Cody Schwab, then known as IBDW, went on an insane run through Crudo, HungryBox, and Plup twice to claim his first major. And this win wasn't exactly surprising, unlike our next entry. That same Summit 8 where Axe made history, Cody had what was considered his breakout run, going 0-3 in pools into beating SUJ, Moky, Mango, AmSa, and HungryBox to place 4th. Cody would go on to become the best player in the world in 2023 in one of the most unprecedented years of Melee ranking history, but that's a story for another video. The 20th player to win a major tournament was inarguably, undeniably, and indisputably the coolest one. And that's not me overhyping it or over-exaggerating it, just let me get into it. Because like Axe, he played what was considered a pretty bad character, while also going down as one of a few international competitors who could say they've accomplished such a rare feat. AmSa began entering tournaments in 2013, and during that time there were hardly, if any, people in the universe who played Yoshi at that high of a level. In fact, the tier list at the time of his first tournaments placed Yoshi as the 6th worst character in the game. But despite all the noise and doubts, AmSa trudged onwards with his trusty Red Dino, making it into the top 100 within his first year of competing and entering the top 10 by 2018. But on October 9th, 2022, the Melee world as we knew it, over 20 years into its competitive lifespan, was changed forever. The Big House 10, with nearly 1,000 competitors, is now known as one of, if not the most stacked Melee tournaments of all time, just in terms of the sheer volume of top talent in attendance. Although AmSa had gotten close to a major win at Pound and Double Down in the same year, some were kind of skeptical of his chances, thinking the time where he could be the best had passed him by. But despite all of the odds, traveling from Japan so often that he ended up moving to Canada for a competitive season, playing a character with little to no data of other players to learn from, and slowly but surely making his mark into history, AmSa did it. He won the Big House 10 over some of the best Melee had to offer. Kadoran, formerly top 10, HungryBox, one of the best in the game, Sunsei, soon to be top 10, and Mango, considered the GOAT. At the hardest possible tournament, AmSa single-handedly skyrocketed Yoshi up the tier list and became the first player to ever win with the character. And he wouldn't stop there. After getting his first major, he took 2 more at Apex 2022 and the Scuff World Tour, and he almost became the best player in the world, ending up at number 2 at the end of that year. I could go into more detail, but I would assume if you've made it this far into the video, and if you're a fan of my channel, you've probably already been exposed to Awesome Sauce and his video on AmSa. In case you somehow haven't seen it, you should literally go watch it right now because it is just pure cinema, man. 2022 was honestly a crazy year for Melee, if not just because of AmSa. But earlier that year, at the biggest tournament of 2022, Genesis 8, what is now known as the craziest Cinderella run in the game's history, happened, where a dark horse from upstate New York almost won the tournament completely out of nowhere with a character that some thought couldn't be played solo in this day and age. Jmook was actually on my flight to Genesis 8. We talked a lot before getting there, and I remember him mentioning how excited he was to try to go on a run. Little did he know he'd get second place and catapult himself into the spotlight. Jmook went down as the lowest seeded player to make a major grand final since 2015, when Fly Amanita did it at Press Start, and he almost immediately garnered the attention of the greater Melee scene with this breakout event by receiving a sponsorship with FlyQuest in record time, alongside a top 10 ranking in his very first showing on SSBM rank. But I wouldn't be talking about him if he didn't win. And just 9 months later, Genesis 9 would come around, and with it, Jmook finally got his dub. I say finally as if it wasn't just just like 1 year until he just won a major completely out of nowhere, but he ended up beating prominent players of the time and current day, including Palpa, SFAT, SFOP, Nun, Zain, Moky, and IBDW, to become the 21st player in history to win a major, as well as the first solo Sheik player since AmSa at Epita Smash Arena in 2008 and Captain Jack at MLG San Francisco 2004. Once again, I did a deep dive on Jmook's history-defining career in this video, and you know the drill at this point. Whew, okay. The last and most recent tournament winner at the time of this video being uploaded was Moky, a player who has, in modern Melee, taken over as the greatest Canadian player ever. And wow, look at that, I already covered this entire tournament in another video, so I promise this is the last one, but to once again not rehash it completely, and because this video has already been going on for a hot minute, let me give you the TLDR and we can get the hell out of here. Don't Park on the Grass 2024 was the return of the series of the same name, which hadn't had an entry since 2018. It was highly anticipated, and it became the biggest event in the Pacific Northwest with 888 competitors. This tournament was notably the first time in over 20 years where a tournament's top 4 had no major winners in it, with its top 4 of Aklo, Moky, Joshman, and Nikki, all from different countries, fighting for history. If you need a reminder, the last time a top 4 had no major winners in it was at Tournament Go 6 in 2004, 20 years ago, where Azen became the second person in Melee to ever win a major. But defeating players who had all beaten him in their last encounter, Moky went on a rampage through Aura, Triff, Cody, HungryBox, and Aklo, and in doing so became the first Canadian player to win a Melee major, as well as the 22nd and most recent player to ever do it. In case it wasn't obvious, winning a Melee major isn't just about being good. The game is almost 25 years old now, with more ways to practice and hone your craft than ever before. Everyone is good. Winning a major is about being better than every other top-level grinder, every bracket demon, every regional boss, accounting for every single variable, and doing it all on that exact weekend. The number of players who even make a debut appearance in Grand Finals is quite small, and to even get a shot to etch your name in history, you probably had to win multiple sets against players who were at least in consideration for being the best in the world. The math honestly doesn't look that encouraging. So why then, when some majors have upwards of thousands of players competing for the top, even bother trying? It's simple, because someone, somewhere, has won something at some point. Naturally, that makes them want to take the next step up. The taste of victory leaves the greatest competitors wanting more. And in Melee, all it takes is one win, one moment, to be remembered forever, which is sick. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my top supporters on YouTube memberships and Patreon: Avishua Stein, Bobby Wasabi, Dark Genix, Eric is Cool, Gustavo Cantu Fernandez, Henry Huang, Ian, Jazz the Pirate, Justin Duncan Mills, Kyle Carlin, Marshall Bradley, and Sam Wright. And thanks to Silver and Blood Requiem for sponsoring today's video. Make sure you check out the game with the link in the description and let me know what you think of it. Alright, thanks again y'all. See you later.